Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thanks for being here. We designed this podcast to be the place for those who want to learn more about the resources available to those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every week with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, how are you today?
Hi, Tom. I'm doing great. It's finally almost spring, which in Michigan means we have a few days above freezing coming up. Here we are. I'd been waiting for this for a long time. As you know, I was traveling in the Southeast the past month or so, and I really didn't like coming back to the cold. So it's good to hear your voice. Let's this will be interesting. We're going to do a couple ideas around battles, and these are interesting topics. Those of you that are science fiction fans or science reality fans should be intrigued.
That's right. Well, every single week, Craig and I try to bring really interesting conversations to all of you that's going to help you enhance and grow your career. And every 3 or 4 weeks, we do one of these digital battles where we invite Mark Pendergast to join us, and he and Craig go head-to-head battling out a topic. Now, Mark's background is he was in engineering, IT architecture, and a development leader for PLM for 30 years. And now he's retired, but he's back contracting with the company, and his hands are right in the middle of everything to do with PLM. Plus, he is the content trustee for the Digital Enterprise Society. Hey, Mark, welcome back to our podcast.
Hey, Tom, it's good to be here. As you know, it's always a pleasure to get together with Craig and kind of crash through some difficult topics in PLM and try and get both sides out there and see if we can come to some kind of conclusion to make everybody's life a little easier because they can understand the topic.
Well, these digital battles are a lot of fun, and today we're going to talk about the singularity. Hype or real, and how does it impact the digital enterprise? So, Mark, let me start with you. What is the singularity?
Well, the singularity is kind of a mythological event that occurs if you follow all the projection of the trends in innovation in the digital world. So the pace of innovation has been doubling, faster and faster all the time. And futurist Ray Kurzweil looked at those trends and said, at some point it needs to become infinite, that just the pace of innovation will be so fast that everything happens all at once. And he dubbed that the singularity. So it's really kind of where computer intelligence becomes so smart that it starts inventing smarter computer intelligences, and that just compounds and compounds and compounds until the AIs are so smart we can't even understand them anymore, and they're inventing things we can't even comprehend. So effectively at that point, I guess they become our robot overlords, and the best we can hope for is being their pets.
So this sounds like a science fiction novel. Craig, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I just find it interesting we call it AI when in fact if you believe this, then it's going to become the better intelligence, not the artificial intelligence, right? And there's a play on words, of course. Intelligence is thought to be a human trait, right? That only humans could have intelligence, and nothing is further from the truth. We've had devices throughout the ages that help us navigate on a ship or help us measure things. And, PLM and everything we do in the Digital Enterprise Society, it's just the next series of steps. It is a little scary, the pace of change, but the pace of change is happening because we have these wonderful computing machines that what used to take humans months to do can now be done in milliseconds and microseconds. And so that kind of the evolution toward the singularity is absolutely upon us. It's here. It's not hype. And all you have to do is look at the disruption of certain kinds of jobs that have been replaced solely by computers. But it's not just artificial intelligence. It's actually getting rid of the rote things humans had to learn how to do in order to make an enterprise work, a company, a bureaucracy, or whatever. And so much of that can be computerized, replaced by a machine. And I think the question is when will the machines be able to make themselves? That's the singularity I read about in science fiction. And I don't know how close that is, right? But I suspect that if it's solely pattern matching and taking empirical data from experiences, that it's going to do it much faster than human beings. We already see evidence of that. So the real question becomes, what's intelligence going forward? You know, some futurists said, Ray Kurzweil was not one of them, but some of them said, you know, as we get all this automation, we'll go to 1 and 2 days of work a week. We won't be working 60-hour and 80-hour weeks. We'll in fact relax and have a better life. I would say if we had figured that out, that would be a form of intelligence. But in fact, we continue to work really hard until, like Mark and I, you wear out and then you retire if you can, right? So I would just point out the singularity, I think, is real. It's coming, but I don't think we should be scared of it. I think the real question is what do we do with our lives? How do we pay for our livelihoods if, in fact, we only have to work 1 day a week or something like that?
So Mark, he says it's real, that it's not hype. What do you think?
Well, I kind of agree with Craig. There's a lot of it that's real, but I tell you what, there's a lot of it that's hype. I think, if you look at pattern matching and things that you can handle by brute force, like chess, it's come a long way. But if you look at general intelligence, you and I talking, figuring things out, I tell you what, I'm putting it right in there with flying cars, big promise, little delivery. I think some of these algorithms are really cool, but they all today, they all rely on brute force. If you can't brute force it, you can't do it. And I think that's the dividing line. I remember, probably 20 years ago, there was a meme on the internet, and the AIs were taken over, and they were, the Starship Enterprise was out there, and they basically said, go ahead and attack. And they tried to attack, and all the AIs blue screened. and they said, well, that was easy.
Well, that's just because you're as am I, we're children of an age where PCs became predominant. And frankly, the standards applied to PC development were a little different than what you and I dealt with in the car development, right? We would never dream of a blue screen putting you at the side of the road. Well, actually, that happened to a couple of car companies, but not the one I work for, that you would allow that in a product, right? And so that's a good example of, I guess, the hype side is when it gets overhyped and everybody thinks it's perfect. Well, all you got to do is wait for the next little hiccup and you'll find out it's not perfect, right? I think this intelligence thing, artificial intelligence, I wish it had a really different name. I wish it might have been called aided intelligence or aided decision-making, because it's not really intelligent, right? What it really is doing things that we do that are repetitive, because that's what computers are good at, and then doing them really fast, right? Some of the pattern matching, the data science stuff happening now, it is revealing patterns that once humans see them, we come to different conclusions. But the finding the pattern is aided by the computer, right? So I think, the flying car thing, I mean, come on, with a pencil and Newton's laws, you can quickly figure out that Moore's laws can't catch up to fix those problems, right? There's unless you can figure out how to get out of a gravity field. But anyways, the hype and the real, I mean, I think it's fun to talk about, but you should talk, and I think this is important. We should talk about the impact to people, right? And I think we don't do that well enough, right? Where computers come along, they do things that automate the job and get rid of a lot of the headaches of the job, the boring part of the job. But then what do you do with that available human capacity? Does it go be more leisurely, or does it become better at the next set of hard problems the product has to solve? And I don't think there's a right answer, but I don't think we're very good at figuring out the answer. We seem to want to talk about the disruption to our lives as opposed to the things that it might enable. And so there are impacts to computer automation. There have been for years in factories and now in the white collar side, the engineering side. But what do we do with that available capacity? And by the way, some of the humans are not really good at the conceptual design and problem solving, but they were really good at if you will, the monotonous, repetitive jobs. Now, I don't think it's actually human nature to like that, but I just think people can be trained to do that, right? So I'm not sure they had a very good life. It was probably a pretty miserable life. But let's let the computers do the miserable jobs. How about that?
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. But I think, like I said, it is probably the flying car right now. I think certainly there's been advances, that have made people's lives better. On the other hand, there are also little AI bureaucrats that are denying you a loan or denying your insurance claim or whatever, that are making our lives miserable. So I think it's a mixed bag. I think the hype that we're all going to be laying back, sipping umbrella drinks and watching the world go by is probably a long way off.
So as we look to all of these changes and stuff, how should we be reacting now to the changes, and can we even react?
Well, take a deep breath, first of all, and keep a level head. But one of the things, and I'm not really answering your question, I'll come back to it, Thom. One of the things that just annoys me to no end is the manipulation of the news sources that we have grown up with and are used to. And other than going and seeing for yourself, you're really not sure what's going on. And that's so sad, because at one time it was a trusted source of insight and just news, what's happening. We live a few hundred miles apart from each other, right? The three of us. It's good to know what's going on in your neck of the woods versus my neck of the woods. But I think that part of where computers have been applied is just terribly disturbing. And especially here in the United States, we've seen our example of that over the past 5-6 years. And it's probably been going on longer, but it became really noticeable, to me at least, in the last 5 or 6 years. So how should we react? Just because it came on a computer to your phone interactively doesn't mean it's worthy of trust, is one way we should react. And another way we should react is, if it's really replacing my job, I need to get in tune with myself and figure out what it is I'm going to do for a living if that former job has been computerized and is no longer needed, right? It's your own responsibility to first know what you like, and then second, figure out how to make a living doing it, right? It's one reaction that you got to take ownership of, as to how to manage through these times where we have more and more computer automation. We have to react. We shouldn't deny it, but we should also be skeptical, and we should own the solution to it.
Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think we should react. I think we can react. A lot of it depends on the speed of the change. And this is where I say that the singularity is hype, is I can't imagine things changing as fast as they predict they will. So I think we'll have time. And you can look back, and we've had transformations. We had the Industrial Revolution. We had the elimination of, draft animals and replacing them with machines. And we've had all kinds of revolutions. And yet life goes on. People keep working. I think, if you look for a positive reaction to this happening, you see the STEM movement, the science, technology, engineering, and math that we're starting to introduce in schools, starting to say, hey, you can't just sit around and find a job sweeping a room anymore. Well, I guess actually that's probably one the AIs wouldn't do, although I've seen the little chariots that do all the sweeping. But the future is for people who are going to be creative, use their brain. Most of us like to do that, so it's a good thing. Also, I can't imagine a robot plumber, climbing underneath my sink and trying to fix it. So I think there's always going to be room for people, but we need to move on. And just like the horse and buggy makers or the guys that made the harnesses for the horses, they're going to find other things to do in the new economy. I think Ludditism is kind of a negative reaction to all this, is people, they want to go back to nature and they don't want any technology and go live in the mountains or whatever. And good for them, but a lot of their ability to do that is enabled by the stuff that they don't want anymore. Now, based on, as Craig keeps pointing out, based on science fiction, I would say let's not give them control of the nukes anytime soon.
Well, I'm
good, because humans are doing so well with that, but never mind. Let's not go there.
Yeah, well,
I'm reminded.
We have second thoughts.
I'm reminded of the television show of my childhood called Battlestar Galactica, and this is exactly what happened. Right, the robots. There were 12 planets, and the Singularity came along. The robots started creating better robots, and then they decided we don't need humans. So here's a question for you: who's in charge of all this advancement?
And they come from science fiction authors, but a lot of times those guys are scientists, right? And there was one who wrote a bit, and they made it into movies now, so you can watch the movie if you prefer. But there are notions of a hierarchy of laws, of principles. And by the way, we humans have organized that way as well, right? And so I think some of this is, you just don't let it happen without some sort of architecture of principles, right? And the simple ones that are in Asimov's science fiction are things about no robot can hurt a human, right? And no robot can hurt itself if it in turn hurts a human. So these are simple things, but you got to define what hurt means, right? If a robot makes your life easier, but now you're bored and you become an addict of some sort, was it the robot's fault for offloading the work, right? This is an interesting philosophical debate. So I think there should be some rules, there should be some guidelines, and there are certain things. Mark had an entertaining example that you really shouldn't let in the hands of any automated machine. It really should come back to human judgment, because we still have compassion. We also have intuition. We have a few other things that, as far as I know, we haven't figured out a way to do those in a digital computer yet. So I think there should be a framework of some rules, and some of the rules are really simple. You cannot invent something that takes on human sustenance or takes on human survival. You can't do anything that goes after that. Okay, so that's easy to talk about. Can it really happen? Well, some of the things that I complained about earlier with what's happened with AI and I love the days of the original search engines on things like Google, because you pretty quickly found what you were looking for, and they got really good at putting relevant stuff at the top of the list. Well, now it's influenced by marketing dollars and advertisement and so on, and so you got to wade down through the pages or pay for a service that gets rid of the advertisement. So it's kind of goofy. It's not what it was when it started, and that's unfortunate. But that's an example, right? Is should the search results be relevant to the inquiry, like you were at a library, or are they going to be relevant to money making things, which they clearly are money making at the moment. That's the way they evolved. So I don't know, Mark, what do you think? What else should we do to prevent the machines from making better machines, like Thom mentioned in Battlestar Galactica? Yeah. By the way, I wasn't a child then, so I got to be older than Thom, but never mind.
We knew, wait a minute. We knew that.
No, I think part of the problem is going to be a lot of these decisions are going to get handed off to politicians. Politicians have never been known well for their long-term thinking. So they're going to make kind of spot decisions on what's going to get them elected in the next election. And I think we may go down some rat holes that we don't need to go down. On the other hand, if it happens slowly, I think we'll react to it. We'll have time to kind of, generationally get used to it. But I think that's probably the biggest problem we've got right now is there's just so much influence of people that are trying to, uneven the playing field for whatever it is they're trying to do, that this certainly has a tremendous potential for abuse. And certainly the scientists have never been one to get in the way of that. They're chasing grant dollars. And so whoever's paying for the research is going to get what they want. So I think, again, it's a matter of, in the end, we all benefit. The stronger we can make humans, the smarter we can make us, the more prepared, the more skills we can give people. And it starts with education, right? Elementary education's got to tell kids, you got to have a skill stack. You don't, robot's going to be doing your job for you. You have got to be excellent in many ways and in things that robots just can't do, or at least can't do today. Right. And that's the kind of the STEM reaction is, let's get ready for it. And let's make ourselves stronger, and all society will click up a notch like we have in some of the other industrial revolutions.
So, Mark, that is a great segue to my next question. And that is, assuming this is all coming, slower or faster, how will whatever it becomes actually impact our daily lives? Let's think, we've hypothesized a little bit about this, but let's talk about, if this comes into reality, how does all of this impact our daily lives, especially those of us who work in and around PLM?
Yeah, well, I think most of it's going to happen behind the scenes. And I think it's going to be little things that make decisions faster. So it's going to be your claims adjuster. It's going to be able to put together a pretty good estimate for your car repairs. I think it's going to be insurance underwriters are going to be better at matching what type of insurance you need and how much it should cost you. It's going to be doctors look at a kind of fuzzy x-ray and there's a little voice over their shoulder saying, oh, that looks like a tumor. Why don't you go after that one? So I think to some extent that's already happening. And in the PLM world, we're going to see more and more AI, more and more analysis tools that can go in and look at the heart of a design and tell you that, hey, if you did it like this, it'll be a little bit better. In fact, one of the big revolutions that's been happening that a lot of people don't know about is the synthesis of mechanical structures. Mm-hmm. Hey, I got these loads. Could you make me a very lightweight structure that handles them all and is cheap to produce? And they can do that now. And it's amazing. And I don't see a lot of people using it on real production parts. But where it's used, it seems to save a tremendous amount of money and comes up with things that humans would have never imagined. But it's kind of, again, this brute force approach to say, okay, I got all these forces. If I just start whittling away at this block of stuff, if I leave this left, it handles all those stresses. So I think it's already happening, a lot. I think another place we're going to see it that's not PLM related is most of the commercial arts, the fine arts, I think is going to get automated because anymore it's all formula stuff. And we'll be banging out top 40 hits, one every 30 milliseconds.
Oh, I hope you're wrong, Mark, but that's an interesting piece of insight. I want to go back to PLM.
One can argue it's happening now.
Yeah, so I got to choose what I listen to, right? But back to PLM for a second. Your point about synthesizing a part. Part of what I loved your example because in the passing you said how you mill it or how you remove material to make it. That's one of the great revolutions occurring, and it's an example that we can all identify with. Instead of melting something and putting it in a mold and cracking the mold apart, or taking a block of something and drilling and filing and whatever, what's happening with additive manufacturing is building it up layer upon layer, which in some ways is more like a biological process than it is a manufacturing process of old, where in the Middle Ages you were pounding steel and iron over and over until you got a blade that was the way you wanted it. So my point is there's revolutions in how we make things physically, that will enable us to take advantage of computer automation in ways we hadn't envisioned. And we've been talking about it for decades, but it's only now becoming real. And what was the last keystone that let it happen? Well, it was really this ability to print metals, to print plastics, layer upon layer, rather than give me a block and I figure out how to mill it. So whatever you do in this world, even making decisions about looking at images of a tumor, I could imagine imaging for medical purposes is one of the places where we're going to get huge advances, and it's going to be to all of our benefits. And to say that was bad to the technicians who used to read the fuzzy pictures, I don't think it's bad at all. I think they would agree it's a huge step forward that we can do that. So there's going to be lots of advances that happen because of basically better pattern matching, or in the case of the example you used, as long as you capture all the loads, then you can make an automated, perfect design that's not overweight, that can be manufactured through additive. Of course, the Achilles heel there is knowing all the loads. And we know a lot of loads, but a lot of times we don't know the whole story. And so we then put in safety margins. We've done that forever in engineering, right? So I think the evolution of how you manage safety, how you manage the margins, will be something to watch as we go further down this road to the singularity. But I for one, don't think we will ever allow a machine to make a machine. We'll allow a machine to make parts of a machine, but a human's involved with the final validation. That's what I believe in my experience. We're not able to cross a couple of those last boundaries on intuition, decision-making, and what you do with your gut, right? How do you turn that into equations? That's kind of difficult, or at least as far as I know, hasn't been done yet.
That's why we hire MBAs. They'll figure out the equation that says it's cheaper to give it to the robots, and then they will.
Oh, Mark, I wish in essence you were wrong, but our corporations do put too much value in what an MBA model says. That's true. If you would just let some engineers and scientists go after the source of their data, you would quickly conclude you shouldn't be making decisions on that data. But that's something we should work on, is the removal of obfuscation. And I don't mean to lose everybody, but when you willingly color up the facts, that's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong.
Well, the problem is, Craig, they take their estimate out to 6 decimal places based on assumptions that are plus or minus 20%.
Well, okay, but then why do they do that? Did our education system tell them it was okay to do that? It's not okay to do that.
All right, guys, as we wrap this up, Craig, 1 or 2 sentences, your last thoughts. Go.
Well, the pace of change is amazing. It's going to lead us down the road to the singularity, but we probably need to address, like some of the famous authors have, how do you manage it when it gets there? And the way you manage it is through a framework of rules about machines and humans. We need to work on that.
Okay, Mark, same thing. 1 or 2 sentences, your final words.
Hey, the future is always brilliant when we make people stronger and smarter and build their skill sets. And we've been through transformations that have just been amazing. And again, they keep accelerating, but each time we come out stronger and stronger, and life is better.
All right, well, Mark and Craig, thank you once again for being part of the digital battle here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Everyone who's listening, join us every single week for more thoughts, ideas, and useful information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.